It's Absolutely Auburn, a place where we'll talk about all things Auburn, Maine, because we're in the middle of it all. The City of Auburn's communications team is dedicated to helping you connect with city government and learn everything you need to know about Auburn, our city, our people, our events, and our community. Welcome to Absolutely Auburn.
On today's episode, we are talking to Kelsey Earle, Auburn's finance director, and Rita Beaudry, our grants manager. And we kind of get a nice behind-the-scenes look at what goes into the city budget process, how grants play a role, and really a way both ladies work with a variety of city departments. So check it out. Welcome back to Absolutely Auburn. I'm your host, Jen Bonig, and joining me is our producer, Abby Bourne.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Abby. Also in the studio today, we have Kelsey Earle, Auburn's finance director, and Rita Beaudry, the grants manager for the city of Auburn. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Kelsey, as the finance director, you oversee the city budget and work closely with all departments. Can you share a little more about how long you've been with the city and what your typical workday looks like?
So I've worked for the city of Auburn for 7.5 years. I actually grew up in Auburn, so it was a bit of a homecoming when I started here, which was exciting for me. The finance office is often asked to handle various tasks that don't really fit into any other department as well as finance. So you never really know what might come next. But in addition to the budget responsibility that you mentioned, I'm also responsible for citywide accounting, audit, fiscal reporting, debt management, treasury and cash management, investments, real estate tax and collection, risk management, insurance, our financial management systems, and purchasing. So
that's it?
Yeah. So on a typical day, I could go from doing a debt service analysis to speaking with a resident about their property assessment to processing our property and casualty insurance renewal to helping out at the front desk in the tax office. Sometimes you'll see me out there. So in this role, there's really no typical day, which I do love that about it. But all that said, I'm really quite lucky to have a great finance team that makes that all possible. There's quite a bit of crossover between what we do in financial services and the financial functions of every other department throughout the city. So it's our job to assist the other departments and in that regard and to work as a team.
Yes, yeah. Finance is a component that, I think is part of most every department. We've got to deal with finance in some way, shape, or form. And then Rita, as the grants manager, you oversee a variety of city projects that receive grant funding. Can you share a little more about how long you've been with the city and what your role entails and what your typical workday may look like?
That's a loaded question.
I know.
I've worked for the city of Auburn since 1989 in several city departments. I worked 15 years with the Auburn School Department, 15 years with the Auburn Police Department, and now I'm in the city manager's office. While in each of these departments, I've had many responsibilities to include the writing and applying for grants. I've also been responsible for the management of the grants once they were awarded. Some consider grants as free money, but that is not the case. Funding sources have specific initiatives with goals and objectives to bring those initiatives to fruition. Managing a grant includes doing what you wrote in the grant application, overseeing the purchases to stay within the approved budget, and monitoring the progress to finish the project within the specified grant period. The most important part of managing a grant includes reporting on all of the individual elements and meeting the associated deadlines. It's also an opportunity to showcase your accomplishments. Currently, I'm managing the City of Auburn's American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, which, as of today, includes 50 individual projects. In addition, I'm also managing multiple federal grants that altogether total approximately $25 million.
Wow.
Early on, writing local, state, and federal grants were very involved, but today, all grants are extremely competitive. Writing a grant requires reading the RFP, the request for proposal. All grants have specific application instructions and requirements. And typically, the turnaround time from the posting of the RFP to the submission deadline is approximately 4 weeks. A federal grant usually includes upwards of 150 pages of detailed instructions. Following the instructions to the T is the most important piece of a grant application. If you can't follow the directions in submitting an application, like using the correct font, the size of the font, margins, or submitting it by the deadline, your application will be rejected. The rationale behind this is if you can't follow the directions within the instructions, it's likely that you might not follow the award guidelines.
Details matter.
Details matter. Have I ever been involved in having a grant rejected? The answer is yes. While working for another department, a grant application was 1 minute late in being delivered to Augusta, according to the timestamp. The person making the delivery was caught in a traffic accident.
Oh.
The application was rejected as all other applicants were there on time. It was very difficult for the person to come back and let everyone know that all their hard work in submitting the grant was for naught. This is one of the reasons I like to have grants submitted at least 1 day prior to the due date. Avoiding bad weather, computer glitches is in everyone's best interest. Having a collaborative team of people involved in the creation of the project that aligns with the goals and objectives of the funding source is critical to being competitive. As an example of this, the Federal Aviation Administration has allocated $50 million for upgrades to municipal airports and is soliciting grant applications. The Auburn-Lewiston Airport is in need of runway upgrades. While I have knowledge of grants, I do not have expertise to know what is needed for runway upgrades or the terminology that grant readers are looking for. In order to submit a competitive grant, we need to have the airport manager, grant manager, facilities manager, and others who can provide information regarding the need and costs associated with the project. Having a team approach works best, especially when a grant is awarded. That way, everyone's on the same page as to what the project really does entail. Developing a realistic grant budget is the first step in writing a grant. Requesting quotes from vendors can take time, but it's difficult to craft a project narrative along with a detailed budget narrative as to how you plan to use the money when you just don't have those pieces. Federal grants are typically cyclical. That means that annually the government appropriates X number of funds to each federal agency. Since we know that transportation, aviation will have funds available, it's never too early to begin the process of gathering a team, information, and beginning the writing process. When the RFP is posted, you already have a bulk of the work done and can meet all the grant requirements of the grant submission. My typical workday starts with reviewing my calendar and that of the city manager to ensure that we are prepared for the day and meeting any deadlines we both have. From there, I'm working on processing invoices for payments, writing grant narratives, managing budgets, and monitoring all the grant-related projects we have, and working on any project that we as a city have in the works.
Well, that's so really both of you have to work very closely with all different departments because that's, like you said, Rita, you're not an expert in that, what does the airport runway improvements? Okay, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Exactly.
So, and then you always have that time crunch too, because as we know, a lot of times there are tight turnarounds for these grants. And having worked with you on a grant that we submitted to the state, yes, Rita was determined that we were uploading that grant the day before it was due, just in case we had any computer issues, because I think you had an issue getting into a system before and getting a password reset and all of that. And it takes time because on the other end, they're not in a rush.
Yeah, they're just waiting.
Right.
Well, the other piece too is, as a city, we know that our financial system, for instance, gets upgrades almost daily. They're done overnight, but we don't know what those upgrades are. So when we go in the morning thinking that we're going to do X, Y, Z, and that doesn't happen, we're not the only municipality that does that. The federal government uploads and upgrades their financial systems all the time. And it can be some things as simple as they've moved the submit button and now you're looking everywhere for it. And that becomes a challenge. It's also eating up some of your precious time to submit it on time.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, the details matter, especially when it comes to the grants. But even with finance and numbers, the details matter.
Very much so. Yeah, it's important to make sure that we're not putting a decimal point where it doesn't belong, for example. It's very easy to
transpose numbers.
It's happened in the past. It's human error, right? And even software error sometimes. Yeah. Right. So we have to check, double check, triple check.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can take time, but it's to ensure that we're providing that accurate information.
Right. So, Kelsey, on May 20th, the City Council approved the fiscal year 2025 budget, which runs July 1st to June 30. So that'll start July 1. You and your team, along with the city manager and various department directors, started working on the budget in, I don't know what, probably December, maybe earlier? Earlier?
Yeah.
Can you share a little more about the budget process and how the budget gets drafted before it's even presented to council?
Yeah. So we actually started the process officially in November. Of course, everybody keeps an eye on their budget numbers throughout the year, but in November, the CIP or Capital Improvement Project request forms were sent out to departments. It's something they think about. We have a 5-year plan, but it's important to put the actual request forms for the upcoming year in at that time. So for the overall operating budget, we begin by reviewing the current year, comparing it to the previous 2 years to help determine any projected increases or hopefully decreases and get a starting point for that upcoming year. And then the next few months are spent analyzing that financial data. We're gathering upcoming contracts, any county and intergovernmental totals, and we're working together to find efficiencies where possible. And the city manager and I meet with the city of Lewiston, LA 911, the Auburn Public Library, the Auburn Lewiston Municipal Airport, and others to discuss their funding needs. And once departments finish their requests, they submit them to the city manager and I for review. And the city manager then creates his recommended budget, which goes through quite a few different drafts as well in order to be submitted to the council for review. So often several drafts of each of these are created. It's hard to keep track of sometimes, but in short, there's a lot of work put in to make sure that we're providing that accurate data that we mentioned before, presenting it clearly, and providing the best service that we can for the greatest value to the residents. Because as a resident of Auburn myself, I appreciate the process and its results and the fact that that work is being put in to provide that to us, much more having been part of that work. You never really realize how much work goes into it when you're not working in the city. I think
yes,
it's hard to understand sometimes because you only see that surface, right? The part where we're presenting everything. And you don't see the weeks or months that have gone into getting that information out to you and making sure that it's accurate. And I think it's important for people to, when they get a chance, maybe in high school, there's a civic class that tends to come and visit us and they visit the departments. We get to tell them a little bit about it and they can see how much work goes into even registering to vote. You see all the different processes, right? When you come to pay your taxes, it's not just you hand something in. There's all these other pieces that go into that amount.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you said that, Kelsey, because I think, that's part of what we're trying to do with this podcast is maybe unmask a little bit of what is going on behind. Not that it's a secret, but I think a lot of people don't always know what government does and how much it does and how much detail and work and time goes into everything that comes out of municipal government and state and federal as well. But I especially with something like the budget, it's so contentious, and obviously money is something that people are really concerned about, rightly so. But I hope that people listening to this, taxpayers listening to this, realize that, the people who work at the city have put months and months of work into these decisions, and it goes through so many revisions. Like, this is incredibly thoughtful, detailed work that people take a lot of time to do. So it's not, we want to be as transparent as possible as well. It's something at the City of Auburn we really value. So I'm glad to be sitting down with you guys to learn a little bit more for myself, but also hopefully people listening can realize that everything's made with a lot of thought behind it.
It is, yeah. I mean, this, like I mentioned, the official process for this budget that just passed in May was around 7 months of work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
a long time.
it's a long time.
Yeah.
When you're creating your budget at home for your monthly expenses, you sit down and you take quite a bit of time to do that, right? This is a bit bigger than that. And I don't want to say more important, because either way, it's your money.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we're being responsible with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, the city budget was approved by council, but the school budget is going before the voters on June 11th. How does the school budget factor into the city budget, Kelsey?
Sure. So the finance department works closely with their business manager and assistant business manager, because their financials are part of our own overall. And since the school is part of the city, their budget affects the overall tax rate. It doesn't affect the city operation budget, which is why we can pass our budget and not have that change based on that vote on June 11th. But a change in their requests would change the expected mill rate, which is the amount that we multiply by per 1,000 on a tax assessment.
Right. So don't forget, go out and vote for the school budget on June 11th.
Yeah, it's often a really low turnout, which
Yes.
it can be disappointing. I think a lot of people want to have a voice in that, and there's every opportunity to do so. You can vote absentee. I think you guys have talked to the city clerk before,
Yes.
but it's important to remember you don't have to show up on that day if you
Right.
can't make that work. We want to hear your voice.
Yes. Yes. So
Actually, speaking of absentee ballots, they can be requested by June 6th, which is next Thursday. So I think that's the day this podcast will be coming out.
Excellent.
So
Good call,
if
Abby.
you're going to vote absentee, get it by today, June 6th.
Get your ballot. And now grants also obviously factor in to the city budget. And we've got, and Rita, I know you mentioned some various kind of programs and initiatives, but that grant funding does help us provide vital services and meet community needs.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the more impactful grants that you're seeing, or in your opinion, I guess, that you're seeing in our budget?
In a perfect world, each municipality would have all the amenities you could think of and where residents would pay little to no taxes.
Would be great.
In a perfect world.
I'm a taxpayer in Auburn too, so I'm mindful of all that we do. The reality is municipal budgets can't sustain everything. Grants do play a key role in supplementing a city's budget. That's a key word. Grants augment or add to what you currently have or need. A grant cannot supplant. Supplanting means removing or reducing an item from the municipal budget and have the grant pay for it. An example of that is the police department needs 2 additional police officers. They write and are awarded a DOJ, a Department of Justice grant, in the amount of $250,000 to add 2 police officers. These new officers will supplement the current workforce. What you cannot do is reduce your municipal budget by those 2 officers and spend those funds elsewhere. That would be supplanting.
Yeah.
And grants are very, very clear about utilizing funds to supplement and not supplant. The one thing you don't want to do is say, who's going to know? Because grants also are audited. They're audited by our private firm. They're also audited by the feds. If they see that you're doing that, it affects all future grant funding for the city. So you don't want to be going down that road.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much every move we make can affect any future moves.
Absolutely.
So we have to be very careful, not only with being transparent, but in how we handle each and every transaction even.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Wow. And Rita, I know you mentioned earlier with the ARPA funds in particular that help fund, what did you say, like just over 50 projects or around 50 projects?
There's 50, and City Council is going to be reviewing some additional funds that have not been used or that the projects are closed, and there's extra money. So City Council will be reviewing those numbers on Monday and then making recommendations as to what projects they would like to fund.
But that's 50. That's a lot. That's a lot to manage and account for.
Absolutely.
And that's just one source.
I was going to say it's just ARPA funds for those 50 projects. So it's not all the projects.
Right. It's not all the
ARPA projects.
That's just the ARPA projects.
You'd be
Correct.
surprised to see how many accounts we actually have to keep track of overall in our financial management software.
Right.
Wow.
It's a lot, but it's important to make sure it's specific for everything that we do. So we could easily report out or explain where that money came in, where it went out.
Exactly.
And that's grant funding and otherwise.
Yeah.
Right.
And now I know a lot of times grant funds, they come with a lot of prescribed rules and requirements, or as I like to say, there's lots of strings attached. So,
absolutely.
So one, you need to know that going into it, so you know what those strings are. But I'm assuming that there are some kind of common requirements that you see with grant funds. I'm assuming they all want to see a report or updates on the project and when the project closes out. What are some of those common things, I guess, that you see, Rita, that most grants, I guess, are looking for?
The most common requirements include following the criteria that is set forth in the award letter. This is a contract, and it's well defined as to what you can and can't do. For example, you may be allowed to provide an all-day training, but a ruling from the federal government for all government grants is that it does not allow you to provide food or beverages for this training.
Oh, interesting.
So this has been a ruling for, 7 or 8 years now for all federal grants. So what does that mean? It means that you must either provide these items from your own municipal budget, which you might not have budgeted for, or charge the individuals to participate in the training to cover those costs. Another requirement is quarterly grant reporting, which has become the most common requirement for all grants. Regardless of the funding source or award amount, you can have a $250 grant award, but they want reports.
Yeah.
This provides the funding source the opportunity to see what you're doing and how you're spending their funds. If you're not meeting the prescribed project initiatives and timelines, typically they will provide assistance in meeting your goals and objectives. You didn't ask what challenges grants might pose.
I did not. But I was
Tell us the challenges.
I was just thinking that, like, okay,
Numerous.
what if you have and what if you have questions? Are you able to ask someone a question? Like,
yes.
Okay.
They assign program managers to you. The challenge is they may very well do it by region. So the New England states may have one person.
Wow.
Well, there's a lot of municipalities within that.
The New England states.
New England states.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to say that we can't continue to write grants and not have the adequate staff to implement the projects. People can say they're complaining about the city streets. Okay, so you could write a federal grant and get $10 million. But if you can't get the subcontractors to come in here during the very short window of time that we have in the state of Maine to lay down tar, then you've written it for nothing.
Yeah.
Because it just can't get done. And these grants have deadlines. So you've got to work within the prescribed time. And so as a city, too, it's important that we align our projects with a strategic plan so that we can move the city forward. We must continue to do all the projects well, stay within the budget, and meet the reporting requirements. And again, if we don't do that, the whole city gets impacted, including the school department,
right?
That writes a lot of federal grants.
Yeah, and it's all connected. It's all part of.
It is.
So yeah, I'm just going back to the ARPA and the 50 projects. So I'm assuming those are like 50 different lines, or in a budget somewhere. Like, you can't just kind of lump everything together, because you do have to report out and track every dollar and cents.
Right. So a single project would be a single line in the budget, but there's 10 accounts attached to that single project.
Right. Salaries have to be kept separate. Fringe has to be kept separate. If you're paying a consultant, if you just need office supplies, every one of those has a separate line item within that grant project.
Right. Well, and I think you also made a key point too, Rita, is having the staff. Because I think, a lot of times it's like, well, just go get a grant for that. Okay, well, you got the money. Now what? Do you have the staff, or can you hire, if you have to hire out, contract with someone for services, can you do it in that amount of time and still get the result that you need within that prescribed time frame?
Right.
So I know a lot of people think, like you said, grants are free money, but they're not. It's not really.
It's not. There's so much administrative work that goes into it. It takes up, just our accounting assistant, for example, can process 13,000 invoices per quarter.
Right.
It's one person processing 13,000 invoices, and that's not her only duty.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's mind blowing.
I know. Oh my goodness.
So what is the most interesting part of your job? And Kelsey, we'll start with you.
Most interesting, maybe all the different areas that are impacted by my position. Like I said before, every move we make affects another. And local government affects individual people more than any other level of government. We are the most closely related form of government to the average person. So everything that we do affects them that much more. And that's most interesting, also puts the most pressure on you. It's a level of responsibility, but that's part of what makes it most interesting, is that you are part of, in more ways than any other form of government, everyone's lives.
That's an excellent point, Kelsey. What about you, Rita? What do you find as the most interesting part of your job?
I think that it's not that one day is the same as the next. Most days, my desk looks like a tornado just came through.
But organized in piles. I've seen it.
Yes.
Organized chaos.
Right.
Yes.
It's organized. You know where everything is.
Yes. Because I'm working on so many different projects at the same time. I may have a question for Kelsey. Kelsey's doing something else. She hasn't seen my email. I'm waiting for her answer. And then I have another department director that I'm waiting for an answer for. Or I need a signature from someone. So I'm always managing, literally, multiple piles in order to get to the next step.
Yeah.
What I had planned to do in the morning is not necessarily what I accomplished at the end of the day. And I think those of us working in municipal government, we can all say that.
That's across the board, I think.
Yeah.
But what I enjoy the most is working alongside staff in all departments within the city and seeing all the great things that we can and do every day.
Yeah. So a question that we ask everyone, and it does not have to be work related. And it's kind of interesting because you are both Auburn residents as well, which we don't
not always
go right
which we not don't always the case.
We don't always get that.
2-bedroom community.
Yeah, I know.
We're
not Auburn residents. But what is your favorite thing about Auburn?
The fact that there's so many options. It's a city, but there's acres and acres of hiking. There's areas where you can walk to wherever you want to go, but there's also others where you can have total privacy and just sit and listen to the birds, right? And the community and the people here is the cherry on top. I moved away for a couple of years, came back. I'll probably never leave again, but it's all of those pieces, right? There's just so many options.
How about you, Rita?
Well, while I was born and raised in Lewiston,
We won't hold it against you.
She's been converted to the light side.
I have raised my family in Auburn. Auburn is home. And for me, home is a place where you have a responsibility to affect change, whether it's volunteering in a nursing home, coaching a little league team, belonging to a nonprofit organization, working alongside a PW crew to plant flowers in a park. You don't have to do it every day, but you take your turn doing what you can when you can. I've had the privilege to work in multiple departments in the city, and can honestly say that the people that I've worked with have a passion to affect change and create a better future for our families. And that's why I enjoy coming to work every day.
I love that answer.
I know, me too.
I think since
I'm glad I went first.
no, you also had a good answer, Kelsey, that I think is very true. But I think, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. I think ever since the pandemic, community engagement, which is technically part of our department title, Jen, something that I think about a lot because I think we've lost a little bit of that since people were staying inside for a while because of the pandemic. And I'm hopeful that it seems like Auburn is the type of community where people do want to come back out and help their neighbors and get involved in community projects. And I'm hopeful that we can do more interesting things for the community going forward, whether it's events or because that's, something that we do in our department, but other things too. So I don't know. I'm just, I really like that answer and makes me happy to have these conversations because I love learning more about all the cool people who work at Auburn too.
Yeah. And I know you two aren't Auburn residents, but there's quite a few of us here who live here.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. A ton of people who work for the city. Live here in the city as well.
They live here too, which, and anyone listening to this and they're interested in volunteering or helping out or even just learning more, just reach out to us. We
can point you in the right direction.
Right. We
Absolutely.
can definitely point you in the right direction and connect you with the right people. So don't be shy. Don't be afraid to reach out.
The other piece to remember too is just because you are in a particular nonprofit for 2 or 3 years, you're not married to that. Right. You can give your sweat equity to another organization. Be creative and bring some of the skills you've learned from the other nonprofit to the new one. If you enjoy doing what you're doing, absolutely stay there. But that doesn't mean that you're locked in. You can certainly find something else that you might like to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know we've got the general email is comments at auburnmaine.gov, right?
Yep.
And that goes, I know it goes to
me and
you
Liz.
and Liz. So they can get you, they can direct that question to whomever is the appropriate person.
Yeah, and we actually have an actual person that answers our phone.
Yes.
So she knows a lot. She's
Yes.
been really interested in learning everything about all the other departments. So she can often answer the questions. But if she can't, she can direct you to the right place. And it's been really good having her there because
it's nice.
We never like
human
putting
answers.
Right. We never like having to put it on automated. And sometimes we have to, if she goes to lunch, for example, we have to let her leave, I guess, for that. But
she gets to eat.
She does. But most often it's somebody answering the phone, and where she directs you, that person might not be able to answer the phone. Tax office, for example, they help people that are in person before picking up that phone.
Like the last day of the month, people. A lot of people here
last day of the month, a Friday.
Right.
And I think it's important to say for the tax office, they are answering, or I should say, waiting on customers that are in front of them. So if someone is not getting a call back from those frontline people right away, they are working and they are dealing with the people that
standing
are standing in front of them, and they will get back to you. And oftentimes I'll get a call and people will say, nobody's answering down there. And I'll say, you're absolutely right. they're busy with a customer standing in front of them.
Yeah.
But they will call you back, and I will follow up by making sure that I send them an email so that they know that they need to follow up.
Yeah,
That's
so
a great
just last
point.
week, the clerk's office had a little bit of a lull, which doesn't happen often, but they helped out by listening to those voicemails that were piling up in the box because the office was really busy in person. And they were writing everything down for us. And then other staff in the finance department that don't work on that front line were calling people back for them because they just could not get a second to help to get outside of that lobby area to be able to make those calls. And we were definitely behind, but we called every single person back. And it took a collaboration of departments and team effort. And often that is what happens with big projects or when people get busy. It's a team effort around here.
Yeah, for sure.
And remember, a lot of information about the city you can find on the website, which is auburnmaine.gov. And there are quite a few things that you can do online that you may not necessarily need to come in person for. Not everything, but some things. So if you're comfortable going online and checking that out, definitely do that. But of course, anyone can always come here to City Hall, talk to someone, give us a call. We might not pick up right away, but we will get back to you.
But if they don't want to wait in that line or deal with seeing other people even, right? It's social anxiety. You can register your vehicle online. You can pay your taxes online. Look at statements, see your current balance, get your hunting fishing license. All these things, they can be done online, but we're more than happy to have people come in and help them with that as well.
And I know the budget too has a special place on the city's website. When you go to auburnmaine.gov and you click on the government drop-down menu, you'll find budget there. And I think when I looked, there's like the last 10 years worth of budgets
about right,
are archived on there too. So as Kelsey mentioned, I know you all look at that kind of year over year change, but if you were super excited and wanted to dive in, you've got 10 years worth to look at
again
on the website. So you can do that too. Well, thank you, ladies, for taking time out to join us and explain a little more about what you both do, because I think, it's a little more behind the scenes. And I don't think everyone, I liked your word unmask. I don't think everyone sees and knows all of those parts and pieces that go into some of running a municipal government. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
And thanks for it not being on video. The mask is because I like to hide in the background.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on Absolutely Auburn. You can find all things Auburn, Maine at auburnmaine.gov and goauburn.me. You can also listen to us anytime, anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio, just to name a few. The City of Auburn's communications team wants to remind you that Absolutely Auburn is the only official podcast for the City of Auburn, Maine.